So I wanted to demonstrate this Gantt chart project uh, completed a little bit better, so you have a little better understanding of what this does. And I created this project with two main purposes in mind. One was to create a project to uh, understand Excel a little better, to teach some of the concepts and tools in Excel that let us work with data and um, use it in an efficient manner and use some of the capabilities of tables in Excel, because Excel can do a lot for us in that way and make things easier. And but I wanted to create a project that was useful and had some utility. And so I created this Gantt chart project. It's a tool out of project management to help you plan a project. And so I do want to go ahead and just explain a little bit more about um, the project management use of this also, while at the same time trying to understand some of the functions of Excel. And I've created some other videos that go through the beginning stages of building this. It will format the main pages on this and set up the tables and some of the data manipulation to do some of these functions, but it is not the complete project. I've run out of time right now for recording videos on this particular project, but the videos I did record that will be in the playlist will get up to the point of starting to list tasks, which you can see down here at the bottom. I have some example tasks, and if I scroll to the right, you'll see that these tasks are graphically displayed in a timeline on the Gantt chart. This part's called a Gantt chart, a graphical display of a task timeline. And so the videos that I recorded through will start to show the start and end dates, time periods on the Gantt chart. So I think I will start by looking at this task list down here. You'll see that I have added a couple of planning examples, and two of the most common planning methods that you're going to use is forward planning and backward planning. Forward planning is probably what we would all think of first if we have a start date and we know a basic set of tasks that we want to accomplish, and maybe even a sequence one after the other, and maybe an idea of how long each task might take. We could put the task on our list and hopefully calculate, our start date and end date when we think things will be done, and estimate that way. Now, part of what makes this particular tool useful is that's great if we can have raw dates, but what about weekends and what about holidays? That makes planning a little more involved. And what if a task takes longer than we originally planned? How's that going to impact our overall plan? And that is part of what project management software and Gantt charts are designed to help us deal with. I mostly made this project to teach some Excel concepts, but it is functional, and most project management softwares you're going to be paying money for them. And so this is built, it's free to use, so it's something that we can use when we don't want to be spending money on other tools that we're paying for each month or just paying for up front. So there are a lot of tools available online, and there's some advantages definitely for having something available online, but this gives an idea of how to use something like that, and it doesn't cost anything extra. So if you see my first example here, my forward example, I have 4 tasks listed. You'll see that I have a start date of July 12th, and you'll see that each of these tasks, they have a start and end. And the way these start dates and end dates are calculated, basically if I indicate a start date and then this plan days is how long I think this task will take, then I can calculate a start date and an end date. You'll see that since we're right down here, that I can indicate how complete this task is, and I will get a basic calculation of how much time is remaining, and we'll look on some of my summary information where we might use that. But that's helpful sometimes if you're in the, tracking how things are done, how much time you maybe have left on something. So one of the nice parts of this tool is it has what they call dependencies. So if I know that my second task can't start until my first task is finished, then rather than just manually putting in a start date, I can actually have this dependency ID. And you'll notice on the left-hand side, I have ID numbers for each of my tasks, and they're all unique. And my first one is task 1, and my second one is task 2. And you'll see on task 2, I have a dependency ID of number 1. So, and I've indicated this dependency type is FS. It stands for finish start. It means that the first task has to be finished before the second task can start. And you'll notice that I have 2 more tasks, and number 3 and number 4, and those are both dependent on number 2 being finished. So they could probably start at the same time, but they can't start until number 2 is finished. So if you notice here, I've got a start date of 7/12, and if you look at each of these start and end date, you'll see that my forward planning example would end on July 21st, according to this plan. So that takes into account weekends and holidays. And I'll show you the place where I put the weekend or the holidays, because weekends are easy to calculate. Holidays might vary. But what if I didn't want to start this until today's date, which is July 21st? If I was doing this on paper, I'd have to go manually recalculate things, but in here I can just change the date, 2023, and now I see that today's a Friday, and so you'll see that if I started today on the 21st with 2 days, that it wouldn't end until the 25th. And I happen to be in Utah, so Saturday and Sunday are a weekend, and July 25th, July 24th in Utah is a holiday, so this doesn't end until the 25th. So that's actually 2 work days, one here and one on the 25th. So that's pretty convenient. And you'll notice that since I have dependencies set up, that and the duration for each of those, that these new dates are actually automatically calculated for me, and I know that my forward example would end on August 2nd, and you can see a graphical representation of all of those right there. Before I move on, let me just explain the backward example. So backward planning is when you know the end date and you want to have tasks listed out, and you plan backward. You start at the end and then you put in the next task before that and the next task before that, and you want to find out when you need to start something to be able to be done by that end date. And this dependency type has one that is called start finish. It means that the other task can't start until this one is finished, and that's what you use when you're doing backward planning. So you'll see that I have a backward task here that I also gave a start date of July 12th, and I have a duration, and then I did the same thing where I knew the next task before that I wanted to complete, and that was dependent on the previous one, and I set the dependency type to start finish instead of what we previously tried was finish start. And then I created these other tasks that were also dependent on that, and with duration days. And you'll see when I had that if I was going to finish on July 12th, then I needed to start, the earliest date would be, looks like June 29th. And it's a little harder to read the table, but if I go back and look at the Gantt chart, really easy to see. So that's one of the advantages of the Gantt chart. We can see that I would need to start these on June 29th. And I added a few things that we can have on a status if something is done. I've got some different categories on the status, and a little color coding there just to make it easy to see. If something is blocked, then I know that there's a problem with that task, and I might need to see what I need to do about it. If something's at risk, again, I've got it in yellow. It stands out a little bit more. And again, if I want to change this date, maybe I actually need to be done by July 30th. So if we go change that end date with all these things, then we can see where we would have a start date of July 18th that we would have needed to start to be done by our end date of July 30th. And I picked a weekend date. Let's go pick one. Let's say August 10th. Let's see how that changes that. All right, so we can see August 10th, and I would have to start on July 31st with that. So up here on the top, I just have some summary information. I have an overall start date. Maybe these are a couple phases of a project. So in this case, my start date would be July 21st. My overall end date would be August 10th. But maybe I just want to look at one phase of this. So one of the nice parts of using a table in Excel is we can filter the table. And so maybe I just want to look at the forward phase or the backward phase. I can go to the group and use this, and let's take off the backward. So now I'm just going to see the forward example, and we can still see my filtered start and end, and it ends up with that task start on July 21st, end on August 2nd. That one was what was setting all those dates, but this lets me just see those things. If I'm tracking some of my how complete something is, and I have these durations there, you'll see that I've got my plan remaining. So my task work date originally was 11, but you'll see I have 10.5 days left on it according to what I did there. If I change that to 100%, you'll see that drops that down. So it's a little, there's if I change this to the backwards example instead, now you'll see that my start date is July 31st, my end date is August 10th, and my work days was 13, but I only have one because I have these all marked as completed. So there's a lot of power there in being able to plan and change on the fly. And so that is just an example of a planning tool that we created. For those of you that are going to build this, I think I'll make this the kind of overview video. This Gantt chart is the main part. We've got the summary information up here. We have the task table, and then we have the Gantt chart. And I will show how to create those and format those parts. And then the other main part of this is the settings sheet. So there's 5 tables on here, and 4 really that we're using. And here's where I can put in my holidays and the formulas that I use in the table take account of this holiday list. So this adds a lot of flexibility. I have a lot of holidays listed because I have an academic calendar with some breaks in there that wouldn't be normal breaks on a banking holidays, but in an academic one we have those off. So you can change the statuses, you can change who things can get assigned to, you can make different task groups or different phases of a project. So there's a lot of flexibility here to change things. In the other project videos, you're not going to see these other sheets that I added. The WBS list and the WBS diagram and this timeline chart. After I got this created, a task list and Gantt chart are great, but the real power comes in planning with using what they call a work breakdown structure. I'm not going to explain in detail what that is. You can go look up a YouTube video to tell you what a work breakdown structure is, but just really short explanation. I added these 2 sheets on this final completed file just so they're there and complete, and you can use this tool to actually do some planning. And what a work breakdown structure is you come up with your main deliverables, and then you might break those down into some what do you actually need to do to get that done, and it might have some main tasks and some subtasks. This is a really flexible tool, and I just put some instructions here in Excel of how to create this work breakdown structure, and all these do is listing these main tasks and subtasks. You'll see I have some indenting, and all I did was when I put something in there, I went up to the indent buttons here on the home ribbon and just increase the indent for the main tasks and the subtasks, just to make it easy to see, because it's really easy to see how things are grouped, and you can list things in order. And then if you have more than one deliverable, you can do the same thing for each one, break it down a little bit. What are your tasks? What are your subtasks, if you have any? And then I just made a little hack to create a diagram from that. So I took all these deliverables with tasks and subtasks in the project name, and I put them in this task list. I just copied these over, so you'll see there's my deliverable, my tasks and subtasks, and then I went through, and all of these tasks are dependent on that deliverable, and so you'll see that all of these are dependent on number 1, and you'll see the main deliverables are dependent on the project name. So if you put the project name in row 0, and all this was to create a table with task names and dependency IDs, and then I copied this over to this WBS diagram page, and this WBS diagram page was just an add-in from Excel that I used. I think this particular one was the Microsoft Visio data visualizer. I'm not going to explain how to go get that, but it comes up with this table and this graphical diagram, and you'll see here is a graphical representation of the tasks from the WBS. And this is just a nice tool to help you think through a project of what's the main things you're trying to do and how are you going to get there. And once you have these, then you could take that and add these tasks to your Gantt chart and put in a start date and whatever things were dependent on each other. You could put those in there, and then you could use the task list and Gantt chart to go plan your final start days and end days, and incorporate, and account for weekends and settings. And I did put in, sometimes you may want to create a timeline chart if you want a little, the WBS diagram doesn't really give you dates and times, so maybe you might want to create a separate timeline chart. And I left some links to some YouTube videos on how to create a timeline chart to get a little graphical representation of what a project timeline might look like, that's a little better overview than maybe what a Gantt chart can give you, because this has a lot of specifics and maybe you don't want to look at quite the specifics. So if you're building a project, just ignore these WBS sheets and the timeline chart. You're going to be focused on the task list and Gantt chart, but the real power of a Gantt chart comes from using it in conjunction with the WBS work breakdown structure list, and to help you define what your tasks are, and then you can do some real specific timeline planning using the Gantt sheet. So I hope that is helpful and gives a nice overview and explains a little bit of what these sheets are and what they're used for. And I hope this is useful and educational.